This
although
conference will now be recorded.
it will be a little bit different, and that I'm going to show you what the differences are and how to demarcate and define digital innovation hubs. So next slide, please. So what's a digital innovation hub? Next. I think what you need to do is you need to go back to the innovation chain. So if you take the technology readiness level, there's also something which is quite familiar with you, I'm sure. It came from NASA, and it clarifies the different stages of a technology. But NASA also developed the manufacturing readiness level. And that's focusing on the manufacturability of a product. So where the technology readiness is on the product, the manufacturing readiness is on the process. But if you combine those two, click, then you get into manufacturing. And to be honest, I always hate the technology readiness level and also the manufacturing readiness level. And why? Because it's mono technology. And if you enter into innovation, I rather like to focus on the more systematic approach. And there you can have the innovation chain, which starts with invention and then goes through laboratory prototyping, pilot production and demonstration, and towards a market expansion. And this information, or this dimension, these chains are very important to understand why digital innovation hubs are there. Because if you take that innovation chain and you click and you look at how that's further developed, you can see that there are two elements which are very important. One is the uncertainty of the estimated profit you make as a company, looking at a product and getting it onto the market. At first, during the invention, you will not see any, you will not have any clear view on what kind of money it needs to make. And you need to invest in that. And that's the blue line. So there's a lot of capital needs for innovation. But the problem is that where the estimated profit will go, the uncertainty of the estimated profit will go down after pilot production and demonstration, you need to invest before that. And having those two elements, uncertainty of estimated profit and the capital needs, that creates the valley of death. In that situation, you need to upfront invest, and the reduction of the risk will go after it. And that's why there's an unsync. It's the uncertainty reduction and the needed capitals are out of sync. Yes, thank you, Eva. And a digital innovation hub helps with that. So if you take multiple innovations and multiple innovation chains, you can combine expertise, share equipment, integrate networks, etc., etc. And by doing that, click, you will get better insights on and networks, and that reduces uncertainty and you share the cost. So an innovation hub is about this. It's about reduction of the economic risk by reducing the cost that you need because you share your equipment, and you keep track of the expertise that you gain during those processes, and you can help other clients, other customers with that gained expertise. So that was taken up by the Commission, and in 2016, 500 million were set aside to further develop those innovation hubs. And I can tell you that in the future, also the Digital Europe program will set aside quite a lot of money, and this is a preliminary view, but it will set aside quite a lot of money to develop a digital transformation oriented digital innovation hub network throughout Europe. So 1.3 billion is quite a little bit of money. So this is where the Digital Innovation Hub comes from and where it will also go to. So now the main topic of our webinar is about business models for those Digital Innovation Hubs. Well, you can see here a kind of a description, a kind of a definition of a business model. I think there are two elements there. It is about creating value, but it's also about capturing value over time. That's what a business model is about. So I will take those two elements, click, Eva, and I will go into these two elements, the creation of added value and the capture of added value. So first, the creation of added value. Why are those Digital Innovation Hubs there? It's about lowering cost, as I said, connecting research technology into business application. It creates a dynamic regional ecosystem, and that helps the ecosystem to increase with their competitiveness. But for me, more or less, the most important thing, that's what I also learned in a project in 2012, 2014, it is about bringing together different mindsets. So where you can see that scientific researchers are there, there's engineers, there's business developers and entrepreneurs. The scientific researchers are highly focused on understanding what are the problems with my technology. And the engineers want to take that knowledge and get it into products, into innovations. But the business developments have a different mindset again. They want to sell those innovations. And of course, the entrepreneurs want to create business, want to create money. And those four types of people are in a Digital Innovation Hub and in an ecosystem. And what we saw is that sharing of those mindsets, business, technology, and ecosystem, click, that is important for innovation. You need to combine that. And that gave us the idea of looking at a Digital Innovation Hub and trying to define a Digital Innovation Hub. So what we did was we started with just a kind of a description on that. And we saw that a description with a definition didn't work. What we did was we looked at the services the Digital Innovation Hubs need to address. And those services are about creating added value. So the first core is the technology core. The technology core is about creating, could you go back? The technology core is about the no, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. So the technology core is about the competence centers. This is about the technologies. And this is about creating infrastructures that people can use to share costs and to create new, from the technology point of view, a new innovation. But that's one mindset. And now if you click, the second mindset is as important because it's, Eva, could you click one further?
Yes, it's not working anymore.
Yeah.
Aha, now.
Okay, good. So the second mindset is about taking those technologies into actual business. So that's the business support pillar, so to say. That's about incubator accelerator. This is, I'll continue. So the business element is about helping your customers with translating those innovations into actual business and creating added value for their business. So incubator accelerating, that's about startups. Access to finance is about getting venture capitalists, private banks, etc., governments to help those companies get those technologies into actual business. Skills and education is also very important, but because what we saw is if you have a digital innovation hub and some customers are there, those customers can take back their technologies, but if they don't have any people to support the actual activities in their business, then they cannot make money out of it. Then there's project development offering housing. So you can see that these kind of activities are really getting those technologies into business. A third layer of the ecosystem is about community building. It is about creating a kind of a vibrant ecosystem that helps the ecosystem to connect research and innovations, but it's also very crucial to your digital innovation hub, because it creates a kind of a central focus of the digital innovation hub, and to get new clients, new customers to use your technological infrastructure and your expertise. So it's about community building, strategy development. It's about learning and representation. Yes. So this is the full overview, I think, of the activities that creates the added value of a digital innovation hub towards the regional ecosystem. By the way, what we learned is most of the digital innovation hubs are regionally oriented. They come from a regional authority, a regional government. They get some basic funding from that, and that's crucial in its focus. So then connecting those different services to the innovation chain. So here's the innovation chain again, and click. There's the technological services that are connected there, and then click. Those are the incubator or the business services. And if you then click again, then you can combine that also with the ecosystem services. And that's about creating a funnel. So click, yeah. And this is how you create a funnel. So if you only would focus on technology, and if you even only focus on technology and business, in about 5 to 7 years, a digital innovation hub will struggle with its sustainability. You need that ecosystem kind of activities to complement the services that you provide, because it creates that business funnel of creating new customers or getting new customers. So now we are shifting towards the second the second element, and this is about the capturing of value. And although what we learned is that there's a lot of talk about creating added value, and that's easy. Most of you will know a lot about creating added value of your business. But the problem is very often it's the capturing of the value. And that was the second element of a business model. And I can tell you that one of the things I also learned is that very often those business models of digital innovation hubs are discussed as if it is a private company. And I can tell you that that's not the case. Usually digital innovation hubs are public-private partnerships, and they've got a societal mission. And that societal mission leads to two elements, two financing elements to create or to capture that value. It's the private element, and that's mostly from companies. And it's the public income, and that comes from governments, both the European Union, regional companies, and national companies. So taking this capturing of the value a step further, I can show you the business model of the MTC. For me, the MTC is very often one of the most important examples that I can show you, that I can talk about as a digital innovation hub. I don't know if a lot of you know the MTC. It's based in the UK, so I'm afraid that in April next year, well, if they're our partners, perhaps they are our partners, but perhaps the Brexit will create some problems. But I can tell you that they've got a very interesting business model, which it tells a lot about the added value and the capturing of value. So at the core, there's the strategic RDI, research, development, and innovation. That's usually the core within a digital innovation hub. There's a second layer of contract research that takes that strategic RDI and translates that into more individual products and innovations that can be adopted by companies. But the green layer here is taking those innovations and getting it into applications. And then there's, of course, the last layer of ecosystem and community value. So those are the different services. And what you here can see is why would these activities being paid? And this is about government paying for those different layers, and industry, of course, funding or financing these kind of activities. Within the industry, you can see all different kind of memberships, and MTC differentiates between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 members. So the tier 1 members, they've got access to the strategic RDI. The tier 2 is mainly focused on contract research, and the tier 3 are just partner in the ecosystem. They're part of the community. Governments will pay because those strategic RDIs create new technologies. They're interested in that. But they're very much interested in it if they also see successful implementations. And that's very often forgotten. Usually these kind of competence centers say, look, we've got all new kinds of technologies. Look at this. This is wonderful. And this has so much added value. But the added value, the capturing of that added value, is shown to the government through successful implementations. And those successful implementations also will boost the membership from industry, because they don't like technologies as such. They like technologies when it creates business. And those successful implementations are crucial to convince industry to become member of those digital innovation hubs. And of course, again, with the funnel kind of activities, the awareness brokerage network, that will also add up to the industrial participation within a digital innovation hub. And then if you click, that participation of industry also will convince again a government to invest in a digital innovation hub. So this is a kind of an approach to a business model, and here you can see the way all those services are connected to create one business model. But I can tell you that this approach of one business model is a little bit too simplified. And what you need to do, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, is you need to look at the different services that the digital innovation hub can provide to the customers, and create business models out of all those services. And that's what I'm going to talk about right now. So again, looking at public and private, there are two elements there, there are two incomes there, revenue streams. It's from, because I see public funding also as a revenue stream. It's money to get into the innovation hub, and perhaps it's by definition it's not right, but it's income. And there's the private one. So looking at the public one first, what I see often, yeah, you can go. Next, thank you. What I can see is that public side. A lot of organizations, a lot of innovation hubs go to the government and say, look, at our added value. We create so wonderful technologies, and industry is loving it. So give us money. That's what they usually do. What you need to know is that governments invest because of those four elements. They do not, they are not interested as such if a company will use your technologies or use your services, because a government is there because of market failures. And if you look at market failures, there's basically there's a lot more, but basically those four market failures are very crucial to convince governments to invest in a digital innovation hub. And these are also the terms that are used by government to convince them that they need to pay. So it's knowledge spillovers, creating expertise that will benefit a lot of companies. It's imperfect information, sharing information that will enhance the more broader view. Coordination network failures, public goods. So the training, education of people is a governmental responsibility. So you can convince them to pay for the digital innovation hub if you have education and training kind of activities there. So it's all about market failures, and it's all about not doing it for one company, but doing it for a lot of companies. This slide will shows you the interest and the willingness to pay of those regional, national governments and the European Commission, especially focused on Horizon 2020. And there you can see that it's not easy. One euro sign will say there's co-funding. So it's not full funding, it's co-funding. And there you can see that regional entities are very interested in a lot of those services, but want to pay not all, they want to co-fund. National governments, they're not so interested in public project development, in community building, etc., etc. National governments are much more focused on that. And you can also see a differentiation of those interests and willingness to pay on Horizon 2020. Why is this slide so important? It shows that if you want to create a kind of a sustainable business plan, a sustainable business model, it is patchworking. It is looking at all those different services and using the different opportunities for investment or for financing. And you need to look at all those different services and create a kind of a business model on those specific services using regional, national, European, but of course also your customers. And that's the next slide. So it's about private. You can see some of the ones that are perhaps interesting incomes from the private side, revenues, venture capitals, etc., etc. So if you click further, you can go again to this slide, but now I changed it to large companies, SMEs, and startups, because basically it's a little bit simplified, but basically those three different user or customer groups show totally different types of needs and also willingness to pay. So when large companies, and now you can see the problem emerging, large companies are interested to the community building, strategy development, and representation, but they're not willing to pay. They're mostly willing to pay for the blue line, so the technology line. That's what they're interested in. And for SMEs, it's a little bit more. They're very much interested also to the green stuff. So the business services, but they're not willing to pay for it often. Some incubator accelerator, because that allows them to get a better grasp on how to make business, skills in education. Again, not fully paid. So there's a problem there. And with startups, they're very much interested in a lot of things, especially also the blue things or the green things, but they just cannot pay. They don't have enough money to pay you. And that's where the added value and the capturing of value is a bumpy road. It's clear that those green elements can, if you go back still, Eva, those green elements are important to service to your audience, to your customer base. But don't expect a lot of payment, especially from startups, for those activities. So you need to find different ways to capture that value. And that's through, of course, the financial or the finance, the co-finance, the co-funding from governments. They will be interested in co-funding these things, but there you can see the complication and the multi-business model approach that is needed. Yeah. I also included this slide showing that if you look at different potential partners, they've got also different interests and they want to contribute. This is not about payment, this is about offering in-kind services. So what the tech institutes, RTOs, the kind of organizations, they're very interested in the community building because that allows them to also get new projects and get new assignments. The strategic, the blue ones are also very much there. So the people sign, the people icon is in-kind people, and the other one is in-kind tech infrastructures. Universities are a little bit more oriented towards strategic RDI and contract research. Perhaps there's some community building, but in my experience, they're not in it so much in these kind of things other than the tech institutes. And of course here, it's a black and white thing here, because I know that the team is also very interested in the community building, strategy development and ecosystem learning. But if I see a lot of other universities, a little bit more academic universities, they are not interested in that so much. The other organizations like network organizations, they are much more interested in these kind of things. They cannot bring in the infrastructures, and they're willing to participate a little bit with manpower into those for them interesting services, but it's not all there. They don't want to fully support that. This is also important because it goes to the co-financing and the multiple business model approach. Yeah. So just two examples on the business logic. If you have the community building, this is about the community building. So this is about one of the services. The community building is about getting some kind of community with the customers on one side, that's the left side, and the innovation hub actors on the other side. So what are the key assets? It's the hub branding, the community. It's interesting to be something, have a kind of a status in the region. That's added value. Community database, one-stop shop, etc., etc. So those key assets are important to create added value to your customer base. And what do they see as important elements? Well, you can train them. They can have access to free flex space. This is an interesting one because it's very often forgotten. What I saw at the MTC, they've got a room with all kinds of computers and all kinds of internet connections that the community can just go to and sit. They've got coffee there and they can discuss among themselves what kind of business opportunities there are. That's a community building activity, and it's considered of high importance to the customers. But there's also some brokerage opportunities, some benchmarking info from some competitors, etc., etc. But it will go also the other way. That community and getting a connection to those to those customers will bring back information about the community, and it adds up to the key assets of the digital innovation hub. And then funding. This is about capturing value. So there's why would why would the industry do that? Added value from information and network. How do they pay? General memberships and some dedicated activities fees. This is about organizing conferences and getting some fee, or training sessions, etc., etc. The commission, they love preparing an ecosystem for pan-European collaboration. This is the innovation actions. They are interested in doing that, and they've got formalized networking instruments there. The innovations are a clear example of that, but there's also ERDF kind of activities that you can use. And on a regional, especially on a regional level, connecting to SMEs to the ecosystem is very important. That allows the region to grow, to create new jobs. And they've usually got formalized networking instruments in place. And because this is a ecosystem service, so if you go to the business-oriented services and the technology-oriented services, they will add up to the key assets, looking at successful projects, creating a new branding, a better branding, and new technologies developed that are also increasing the key assets. And of course, this community building will create public awareness. It will create new projects. This is about the funnel. It has access to business expertise. It creates access to business expertise. And of course, you also create additional access to infrastructures and technologies, because those communities are there. So then the second one is I developed on the business logic on strategic RDR. This is also one of the services of the that I've shown. The key assets. This is the technology base, and the technology and the expertise from the people working on that. And it's the ability to share infrastructures, having a secondment to allowing secondments on the premises, access to technological partners, value chain networks, and it's the ability to stack budgets. Those are key assets that you can bring into the game to convince, and here it's customers as well as competence centers to add the value. And the adding of value is about lowering costs for RDI. It's access to increased expertise. These are all the things that I've discussed already about why a shared facility or an innovation hub is there. This is the technology part of that. For a company, it's also the leverage on investments and to contact or to value chain partners. And it will again go back to the innovation hub, because it allows the increasing of budgets, of course, for strategic RDI. And there's a long-term commitment for funding, access to industrial expertise and low-cost experimental equipment. This last bullet is about having your customers bring in some experimental equipment on your premises, and that's interesting for them, because they can beta test that technologies, and you can add it up to your core capex. How is it funded? By industry. Why? Because the sharing has added value, and this is about the tier 1 memberships, long-term investments. Why does the European Commission want to co-fund this? Because it increases the EU technology base and it links research and industry. and especially the framework program will fund these kind of activities. The region is also a very important investor because it allows this creating a technology base will increase the regional profile on this specific asset, and it will boost innovation to SMEs, and that will grow, that will create new jobs. And how do they do that? Well, this strategic RDI is very often it's about co-funding to financing infrastructure. It's capex, and these are not formalized instruments. These are one-on-one kind of investments that you need to go to regions to discuss a one-time investment and individual investments. On a national base, because the last one is about the national base, it is about the increase of the quality of the national innovation in innovation system. It's also, again, informal, one-time only financing of infrastructures, but there's also formalized projects or formalized program that will support RDI projects. Well, these assets, of course, will go into, again, the capital for other activities, the increase of the status. It will create IPR, and the IPR is not about getting money, it's about the status. That's a very important one. And the industrial success will will be created based on this, and it will increase the technology and the high value technological infrastructure. And again is connected to the other services. The community building will input this creation of this business model, etc., etc. You can see this, and I think what is important here also is if you go back, the understanding of the prototyping and scale up. What very often is forgotten is that if you have these kind of activities, and you showcase that the innovation hub can bring the technology into actual business, and that will increase the interest of strategic partners to invest long term in these kind of elements. So that was basically the idea of a digital innovation hub. And I would like to also end up with some information about the business model canvas, because this is usually one of the main tools that you can use to get a better grip on how to develop your business models. There are 9 elements: market segments, etc., etc., etc. I would advise you to go and look at Wikipedia. I cannot spend a lot of time on this right now. I could I've got a presentation on all these elements, but it's too little time to go in depth into this. But I can tell you, Wikipedia, there's some very nice books out there, and that will help you to further develop the business model canvas. But please look at the business model canvas for all the different services that you provide. So it's not a business model canvas for your organization, it's a business model canvas for each and every single service. And that's the difference from a private company. They will allow a much easier one business model canvas for their organization, where a digital innovation hub, it's out of the question. Yeah. So this is I like this picture a little bit more because it connects a little bit more the different elements. So the value proposition is crucial. There are some key activities there. You need to have key resources to provide for that value proposition. The value proposition is connected to the customer relationships and the customers. That you need to think about the channels, etc., etc. So think about this also again as a systematic, structured way to assess the business model. Yeah. I've included one of those business model canvases very quickly, so you can have an overview of those different elements, those 9 elements of the business model canvas. So you can later on you can get a little bit more in detail, and you get inspired by these elements, and hopefully this will help you also to develop that for your own business and your own services. Yeah. Some other thoughts. So one of the things that I need to tell you is, if you look at the Digital Innovation Hub or an Innovation Hub, it has different stages in which it will go through. So the first stage is the preparation stage. It can take up 2 years. It can take up 100,000 millions of euros to have it developed. And if you start, then there's a bump in the costs in the initial phase, and it will go to stabilization. After some time, it will need some renewal of investments, and then you get a continuous growth. And also think about the termination of your Digital Innovation Hub. It's very often the case, and you need to prepare for that. So this is an important diagram. And why am I telling you this? What you very often see is that those 15 services, they want to do it all, and that's not needed. You need to think about the development of the services also in an evolutionary, from an evolutionary perspective. The community building is very important to start as soon as possible with the community building. But if you look at Click, the strategic RDI, it already is there. Very often a Digital Innovation Hub starts with a kind of portfolio of partners on strategic RDI activities. So you take that up and you further bring it to a later end. And of course, with the termination, the community building can stop early, and the strategic RDI also. But the incubator accelerator, that will grow continuously. But please be aware that if you go back one slide, if you do not think about it from the early beginning for all those services, you will, after 5 years, think, oh shit, I need to develop my incubator accelerator activities. And it'll take you about 2-3 years to fully develop that. And then you're out of business already. So you need to upfront prepare all those services. It's not needed that you have them in place at the initiation, but you need to have it thought out and have a plan for that. And that's a very crucial element. So this is one. The second thought I want to bring you is that what we now see is a kind of a competence center, Digital Innovation Hub, regional network, and pan-European network kind of evolution. It's not, if you click, it looks like a kind of an evolution from a competence center to a Digital Innovation Hub, to a regional network and a pan-European network, but that's not really the case. Those exist parallel. Where a competence center is very much focused on the technological stuff. Please go back.
Sorry.
On the technological stuff, the Innovation Hub is adding up those business and ecosystem activities. But what is important today is that in a lot of regions, there are digital innovation hubs that want to collaborate on the regional level together with each other. So where a Digital Innovation Hub is focused on, let's say, robotics, or another one on artificial intelligence, or another one on materials, the regional Digital Innovation Hub networks has a multiple focus, and aims at creating an ecosystem, a vibrant ecosystem of companies and research in their region. And it creates the benefit of economy of scale between the different innovation hubs. So what you see is that a single innovation hub or 2 or 3 innovation hubs in one region, they can shift their activities towards the upper level regional digital innovation hub, and not offering the services all by themselves, but coordinating among themselves. And that's a very important thing, because it adds up to the sustainability of those innovation hubs. And now we can also see the Pan-European Digital Innovation Hub emerging. And that's creating collaboration between the different digital innovation hub networks, regional digital innovation hub networks. And that's crucial for the Pan-European collaboration. And that's a thought I would like to give to you to further think about: what am I? What do I want to do? Do I need to get in contact with regions to further develop this more regional approach? And that's crucial for the sustainability of the digital innovation hubs, or innovation hubs, because it's not only about digital. So that was my presentation. If you can click the last slide. And first, thank you, Eva, for helping me through this. And second, do you have any questions?
Yeah, this is Rainer Leupers from TETRAMAX. So first of all, in the name of all attendees, thank you very much, Maurits, for this great presentation, crystal clear. I liked it very much. I also see that we had quite many attendees here from other projects, but maybe my questions are first a bit centered around our TETRAMAX activity, obviously. One small question that came up is, can we make the slides and the recording of this webinar online available later for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, that would be fantastic. So maybe Michael from Munich, you can somehow care for this from the technical side, so we can put it on the website and advertise it in our social media, etc. One more question I had on you is all these curves that you showed about the evolution of innovation hubs. Appear at first glance a bit theoretical, but are they based on some empirical data that you found out over all those years, or what is the foundation of your models of this?
Yeah, so I can tell you that I look at myself as one eye in the land of the blind, because there's not a lot of information about this empirically. So there's no real scientific research behind this. But I did talk with perhaps hundreds of people already about this. And I also in detail researched about 50 innovation hubs. And a lot of this information also came from the mentoring I do with a lot of regions. So what I do is I organize a training workshop, 3-day training workshops, where there's a lot of people participating in, for example, developing their business models. So they give me feedback, a lot of feedback on how this is organized and what problems they face. And that's going from Italy to the Netherlands, of course, to Spain, to Norway, to whatever. So that's where my information is really empirical information from individual people that are into the development of these innovation hubs.
Okay. And I have one more question, if you allow, because I was really fascinated by your last but one slide. So maybe if you still have control, you can switch one slide back.
Yes.
This network. Yeah. Okay. Because for TETRAMAX, I don't know if you actually had a little time to look at how TETRAMAX is operating as an innovation action and also a kind of innovation hub. We have a pretty similar network model here, where the competence centers, the CCs, are the partners in the project. then we have these local partners around that, and at the end of the day, TETRAMAX is supposed to operate as a pan-European network, precisely looking as in your sketch here. I was quite fascinated that you developed more or less the same picture than we in our project proposal. But in case you had time to take a closer look at TETRAMAX, and maybe Michael gave you some basic info before this webinar, do you have any specific recommendations on how to proceed in our project to make it grow and sustainable and so forth?
Well, I didn't have the time to look at the TETRAMAX itself, but I can, because I've gained some insights in how that pan-European network should be further developed. And basically what it comes down to is that to one question to you: what will happen if the European Commission stops funding your activities?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. If I'm not wrong, our PO is here, so maybe we should have her answer that question. Myself, I probably know the answer, but no. But of course, we're not talking so much about the long-term sustainability here beyond all the years of the project duration. But right now we are at the end of year 1 of this project, so a lot of structures have been built up. So I'd be curious in your advice specifically on our models of operation. We work on certain technologies, we have certain methods, certain partnership structures here, but maybe that's also one thing we could clarify offline in another telco or so.
Well, I asked you this question because in most of the innovation actions, what I see is that if the funding from European Commission will stop, then the project will stop, and
yeah,
that
that's
is
fully correct.
Yeah, and the reason why is because a competence center is, and now I'm going to be provocative, but especially a digital innovation hub is not interested fundamentally in pan-European collaboration, because pan-European collaboration has no real added value for a digital innovation hub. And why? In my experience, because a digital innovation hub is a regional entity. Their mission is to increase the competitiveness of the region, and by doing that, that's a lot of work already. So if you would like to create pan-European collaboration with a digital innovation hub, usually you need the regional digital innovation hub networks to be partner in the pan-European digital innovation hub network.
Yeah, that's right. That's actually what we do. But the added value that we provide in our pan-European innovation hub is that we actually have, real cross-border technology supply and demand. And we know actually from our results that this works pretty well. In this case, the innovation hub is maybe a bit more virtualized than, say, a regional or a local one. But it works, and in my view, it's a nice complement to these regional innovation hubs, which are then also contained, obviously, in this pan-European network.
Yeah, so then I go back to my question again. What will happen if the European Commission will not fund those activities anymore? And that's where the problem is. It is about capturing value. And the capturing of value is within an innovation action today is just by having a local RTO or a local competence center providing funding to an SME or a company in another region, and then get 100% funding from from the European Commission to do that. And that's not a sustainable business model. So what I would advise you to do is think about different business models where you can see also interest from digital innovation hubs to create collaboration, pan-European collaboration between one region and another region where the business model is sound. So that's a difficult thing. You need to find totally different business models there than what is today. And if I may have a last comment on that, I think that what TETRAMAX needs to do is they need to experiment with those different business models. They need to find out what are the opportunities to get regional digital innovation hubs pay for those activities, or the SMEs pay for those activities, or to connect to large companies to pay for those activities. And it's not, I said it as a provocative, what will happen if the European Commission does not pay anymore. I'm sure there's going to be a need for that for setting the foundation of pan-European collaboration. That needs to be paid by the Commission. That's clear. But today, the innovation actions get fully paid by the European Commission. Well, not fully paid, but a lot of money is coming for that, and that's not sustainable.
Yeah, I think you are right. I can tell you that in TETRAMAX, we have lots of concrete plans of how to get there, or things that you just sketched. But maybe this is not a good platform to discuss it in depth right now. So if you're interested, I invite you to have some offline discussion on the phone at some time, where I can present you some more ideas of what is in our plan and how that might be compatible with your visions and your experience. It will be quite exciting to discuss it further.
Good. I'm also the coordinator of the DNet project, and we have the assignment to think about those pan-European network business models. That's our job, to do that.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay, thanks. So I will stop with my questions so the others also have a chat.
Hi, my name is Jan, and can I ask a question? Is it all right?
Yep.
So I work at Chalmers University in Sweden, and right now we are a competence center in TETRAMAX. Thank you for the presentation. My question is about the competitors. So in the business model, something that's not captured is the competitors. And as a competence center, we are thinking about the next step to become, let's say, a digital innovation hub. When I look in the region here in Gothenburg, there are a few research institutes, and a lot of them have the same offers as a digital innovation hub. I mean, how do you see digital innovation hub like working together with the research institutes? And I'm not sure if this is just in Sweden, because I don't know how it works in other countries, but perhaps there are research institutes that also provide this kind of consultancy, contract research, stuff like that to SMEs.
Yeah, so what I would say is get them on board in the Digital Innovation Hub, because for me, a Digital Innovation Hub is not about creating competitors. No, it's about there's a regional, on a specific topic, there's a regional mission to create a kind of an ecosystem, a formalized ecosystem. If you look at the diagram, the amoeba of the Digital Innovation Hub, there's the orchestrator in the core, but there's research organizations, etc., also part of that amoeba, that part of that Digital Innovation Hub. So I would say go and not duplicate activities, but try to expand on those activities to create a kind of a sound ecosystem. And I can tell you that, and this is also from mentoring experience, I can tell you that within the Basque Country, there's a lot of discussion about this competitiveness. The Basque Country is a country where there's a lot of competition among RTOs, research organizations. So the way to go is to have some specialization, but also to allow some not specialized multiple activities. So it's not about getting a fully specialized approach, but it's allowing some services to be organized by multiple organizations, as long as they are in connection with each other and they allow joining up and trying to increase the overall ecosystem. And that's where of course the regional authorities come in.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Yeah, I think you are right that the challenge is probably to find a good niche, because the purpose is not to compete, obviously. And today, with so much emphasis on digitalization, there are a lot of people or these organizations doing that today. But yeah, I think you're right. If we can find a good niche, we could maybe try to build an ecosystem around that. Thank you.
And the niche is also it is also about the need for capital to create that more or less technological service, and look at that from the perspective of the market demand of the region. So if there's a market demand of the region which is very poor and the investment in capex is not worthwhile, then you need to collaborate, and then there's some interest to collaborate, as long as you respect each other and you allow each other to get a piece of the cake.
All right, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah. So here's Martin Balkovic, also like I'm partner in TETRAMAX. So my question would be, if you look at the different like funding of digital innovation hubs, what do you see as the like percentage of contribution of the companies and private sector, of the regional and of the national, eventually European? So what is the like the best mixture, or how just can you comment on that one?
Yeah, I can comment on that one, but it is clear that it has a totally different approach in Lithuania than it has in the Netherlands, than it has in Spain or in Germany. That's clear. Let me tell you one thing. I see a lot of things going on in Germany where the digital innovation hubs are fully funded by companies. So there's already a difference, because I think in the EU 13 countries, there's a lot of need from government, especially from ERDF kind of activity, and a European Commission to co-fund all these kind of digital innovation hub development and also just operational stuff. But looking at a more of an average ballpark figure, I'm much more a consultant than a scientist, so I dare to make those comments. If you look at the MTC, I think it's about 1/3, 50% private. I think they've got about 35% from the national government, and the rest is from the regional governments. And what I see is that a lot of the, I would say more or less 1/3 to half from private would be okay. And then, especially in the beginning, the regional authorities will chip in quite a lot. So, and that brings me, talking about this brings me to another observation, which is more important. In the beginning, the funding will be highly from regional, a little bit from national, and also a very little bit from the EU. But that will change over time when there's a lot established already. So after the initiation phase, then the private money will come in, I'm sure. That's an important element here. What I also can see is that the European Commission is shifting towards the blue icon here. So they will hardly be financing digital innovation hubs. And that's especially, it's of course Digital Europe and Horizon Europe. The ERDF kind of money will go through the national and regional authorities, can go to digital innovation hub creation and the regional digital innovation hub networks. So those are important financing mechanisms. But in the end, I think getting more than 50% private funding, well, 50-60%, I think that's more or less will be average. But there are some initiatives that can be fully privatized.
I have a small follow-up question. This is Rainer. So we have been doing technology transfer at small to medium scale for quite some time, from the university, from other projects. We're doing now the same in TETRAMAX with the so-called TTX, Technology Transfer Experiments, where the model is that typically a university licenses or sells some point technology that solves a specific digitization problem to some company client. But all this is happening at the CC level in your diagram.
Yeah.
So the money goes essentially from the industry to the university, right? And this is working pretty nicely, and that makes a large part of the revenue of those places. But how to convince the, say, SME clients to scale this up to, I don't know, an innovation hub or regional innovation hub level, because they don't have immediate benefit. So essentially they buy the technology, but they are much less interested or harder to convince to invest money into an abstract network, what we all call innovation hub. And thanks to you, by the way, I have now a much clearer picture of what this actually means, because so far it was a buzzword, I guess, to most of us. But what do you have any recommendations of how we could scale up this, bilateral academia to industry transfer business into such a network, including getting finances from also the company clients?
So now you're not going to like this answer, but I think that especially our SMEs are not interested in co-funding the pink services, and that's what you're talking about mostly.
Yeah, right.
So the pink, and that's what you saw in the slides. The SMEs are just not interested to pay for the pink services. So you need to fund that through the governmental authorities. And well, there might be some larger companies. What you can do is that if you have those strategic RDI, so that's the service, you can scale some of the activities to that. There are you can also create a kind of a membership mechanism. So if you have a membership mechanism, that's what they might be interested in. So SMEs want to be part of the game, and if they pay, let's say, 500 euros per year, but you've got 100 SMEs paying 500 euros a year, that might interest them to fund the pink one. But it's that kind of money, and then you need to and the community building business model of business logic shows you some of the mechanisms that you can use. So offering space, creating kind of newsletters, creating a 2-pager for international events that are interesting and sending it that to them, having access to seminars that might convince them to pay for 500 euros a year.
Yeah, we have on this on our radar. I also know of other networks, like there was a previous artist network of excellence in some EU program, where also the EU funding ran out. So the same question was posed that you raised earlier, what happens then? They came up with some membership model with providing some of those services that you sketched, but the observed willingness to pay by the network was very low. So maybe this is the hardest part. I guess it's much easier to get 100,000 euros from a company to a competence center than 500 euros from a company to such a very abstract network. But we will look at how to solve it.
To be honest, it's not an abstract network. It is a network, but it has different added values. And those different added values, because if you have an added value of technology, then it's quite easy to see. But I can tell you that small and medium enterprises do want to meet their peers, and that's interesting ideas. Those are interesting ideas. And of course, what you can do is you can use the TETRAMAX kind of mechanisms, the TETRAMAX funding, to create a community base. This is all about community base. If there's 2 people or 2 companies in that network, the companies will say, oh yeah, go ahead, but I won't pay. But if there's 100 companies included already, and they can say that they've got added value, then a new company will say, what, 100 companies already? Shit, I'm losing my my position. So I need to become also part of that network. So what you need to do is you need to use that initial money to create the community and get a vibrant community there. And if that's done after 1, 2, 3 years, then it'll grow from itself. But it's like a fax. A fax is totally useless until everyone has a fax.
Okay, well summarized. Thank you.
Yeah, so here's Martin again. May I have another question? So you mentioned, Maurits, you mentioned the EU 15 versus EU 13 when we were discussing the best split among the money of private, regional, national.
Yeah.
And you correctly said that it's totally different when we look, for example, at the manufacturing sector. I mean, they have also a catapult, so public money, but mostly they are running on private one, and completely different in Lithuania or somewhere else in the EU 13. And now the question, my question is this the problem of not well developed industry ecosystem? Is it the problem of digital innovation hub in Central and Eastern Europe? And so where do you see the problem is, and how we should work to improve this so that we can have in the EU 13 similar centers as MTC, for example?
Yeah, so if I look at the IFRMS mentoring program that we conducted, what I see is that those national governments and the industries themselves, that there are basically two problems there. One is there's a shortage of money for these kind of activities. That's very poor. And the other one is that they are those EU 13 countries. They usually don't have the evolutionary stage already to create these kind of activities. So there is an opportunity there, but you need to find especially ERDF money to set these things up. And of course, they're fast growing industries very often, but they still are small. And so the money available for funding these kind of things, it's from the cultural perspective, it's limited, as well as from the financial opportunities. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And again, I'm always very much black and white here, and that's of course not the full truth, but it clarifies, I think, very often the ideas.
So
Next
are you
question.
having any consultations with the European Commission about this sustainability issue? Because of course everybody always asks what happens if the EU funding runs out, etc. Some of us are also part in this high peak network of excellence, which has been running now for 12 years or so, where there's always some EU base funding. It tends to shrink over time, but we have data that tell, for instance, the Commission needs to pump at least something like €1 million per year into this network to make it, or to keep it alive. This is simply a type of base funding that is required not to be, not to make too many losses. And this membership fee doesn't work in this case so well. So wouldn't it be natural to convince some funding agencies, be it the Commission or somebody else, to invest a constant stream, maybe a small amount into this to just keep it alive, right? So is self-sustainability really a goal that we should pursue with this? Or isn't it politically more reasonable to assume that the public sector needs to invest a little bit into making all this happen?
Oh, I think you're totally right. And your first question was, am I discussing these kind of things about post-project sustainability with the Commission? Yes, I am talking about that with the Commission. And I must say that if you look at the present situation and the present strategy towards pan-European collaboration, I think that's not going to be sustainable. That approach is not going to be sustainable. So we need to find different ways of creating post-project sustainability of those networks, pan-European networks. So and we're dealing with that. We're focusing on that. Your question about do they need to have a certain kind of base funding? Yes, I totally agree with that. I think if you want pan-European collaboration, to be honest, the most interested party for pan-European collaboration is the European Commission. It's in their core, it's their mission, it's that's what they need to create, pan-European collaboration. And if I look at the Digital Innovation Hub and Competence Centers, it's nice if you have pan-European collaboration, but it's not that crucial. It's a niche kind of thing. The strange thing is that if you create pan-European networks, that it will also increase the sustainability of those digital innovation hubs. Because if you create mechanisms where innovation hubs and competence centers can export their technologies to other regions, and for other regions to import those technologies to their small and medium enterprises, then that has an added value for the further overall competitiveness of the European Union, and the regional, also go down to the regional network, the regions. So there is a kind of a need to do that, but at this moment it's not in their core mission of digital innovation hubs and competence centers, and that's quite clear because they're regionally oriented. By the way, I just thought about another thing which is important here. We're talking about SMEs all the time, and what I see is that there's a lot of larger enterprises also connected to innovation hubs and competence centers, and one way or the other, very often there's a mixed message about small and medium enterprises and large enterprises. IFRMS is focused on mid-caps and small and medium enterprises. But what is very important here is that although the mission of digital innovation hubs and competence centers, well, especially digital innovation hubs, is to help SMEs, they cannot survive without participation of larger enterprises. Larger enterprises will create a kind of a critical mass of funding to those innovation hubs and competence centers that they can build upon to create services that can be provided to small and medium enterprises. So although the mission of a digital innovation hub might be very much focused on a small and medium enterprise, there's a huge need of participation of larger enterprises to create that more sustainable income. And that's something that is acknowledged by regions, by national governments, and also especially by the EU. I think that's perfectly fine by the EU. But use this also in your communication towards your potential funding funders, governments.
Yeah, personally, I'm not convinced that the European Commission buys this idea of focusing more on the large-scale enterprises, because for reasons that we all know, the focus is on SME, because they have a harder time getting this digitalization done and getting involved in tapping the EU money pots and so on. So when I talk to Commission guys, it's always SMEs. It sounds to me sometimes they treat SMEs and industry synonymously, which is of course not so true. So I agree with you that we also need to have the bigger Siemenses or Porsches on board on these efforts, but they are kind of harder to get, right? Because they have their own infrastructures and they might not be in such a need for innovation hub support as a local SME.
Well, your point about the European Commission, I do. When I talk with the European Commission, I always say that, yeah, the mission of a digital innovation hub is towards SMEs, but we need the larger enterprises to create sustainability. And they say, yeah, sure. I've never engaged one policy officer that says, no, this is not the case. Never had one. But it's about the framing of what you're saying. You need to start with the idea of that the mission is towards SMEs. About the larger enterprises to be connected to an innovation hub or competence centers, I can tell you that I've been discussing this also with quite some digital or innovation hubs, and it's usually quite well accepted, because if a larger enterprise wants to invest high capex in specific pilot production kind of activities, those investments have very fast depreciations of money. And although normally about 50% can be reused for if you enter into pilot production, the more modular approach and having those larger enterprises being able to use those technologies, they are very often happy to be partner, especially when there's an alignment of their infrastructures in the hubs. It will just reduce their costs. And from a Siemens point of view, if you have a kind of a demonstrator included in your innovation hub that they can showcase to their community, and you've got the community again of 100 SMEs, they will be interested to participate, because then they've got access and you act as a kind of a sales organization for those larger enterprises. And then there's a win-win situation that can be established. Or don't you agree?
Yeah, again, I don't want to take too much time here, so I'd like to invite you for some open discussion afterwards.
Other questions?
Okay, so if there are no other questions, then I would end the webinar now. Maurits, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative. Also, Eva, thank you for your last-minute rescue.
No problem. Welcome.
Okay, and thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this, and please let us know how we can get wider access to the materials from today.
Will do.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.